Hello, Pinellas County Community Association residents, and welcome to the 2022 Pledge to Plan Hurricane Preparedness webinar. My name is Jess McCracken, and I'm the whole community program specialist with Pinellas County Emergency Management. June is quickly approaching, and for us Florida residents, that means starting to get prepared for hurricane season. Hurricane season runs from June 1st through November 30th each year. And once again, we are faced with what's being projected as an above average hurricane season. Community associations have a unique ownership dynamic that's different from most other residential properties. So it's very important to discuss preparation for hurricane season for not only the residents, but also the association community as a whole. The purpose of the webinar today is to provide you with the information and resources needed to create a plan and to get through hurricane season safely as a condo owner and a condo community. We've allotted some time at the end for questions, so feel free to submit those anytime throughout the program using your Q&A feature at the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. To help us learn about getting through hurricane season safely, let's go ahead and welcome our panelists. Mr. Joe Boris, the Operations Manager for Pinellas County Emergency Management. Let's go ahead and jump right in with you.
Oh, well, thank you. And good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me today, and hope to provide you with some good information to prepare for this upcoming hurricane season. Here at Pinellas County Emergency Management, we ask 3.5 things of everyone, and that is to know your risk, make a plan, and stay informed. And the point 5 is to get involved. So I'll talk about that at the end. Again, know your risk, make a plan, stay informed, and we also ask to get involved. And next slide, know your risk. Condos have your own unique challenges, right? Your multi-story buildings, you got beautiful views with sliders and windows wrapped around your units as well too. And that's really great and wonderful, but those high winds at the upper levels for the floors are unabated. So making sure that you have some coverings for your balconies and or your windows there, is very important to consider as well too. And ideally, that all the units will have thought of that and done that. If your floor does everything and covers your windows, but the upper floor doesn't, winds and rain can come through the upper floors and then trickle down into your units as well too. So just like we ask single family homes, we ask condos to have a complete seal of the envelope of your facility, of your building, so that you can be protected from those high winds and rain that may impact your facility. Storm surge, we assign our evacuate zones by storm surge. And storm surge, can get pretty high, and it can reach to the second floor units, right? And that'd be terrible. Worst case scenario, some 16 to 20 foot of water coming. So they're evacuating up is a good thing. Maybe you think for storm surge, but what happens then when the power goes out because of the storm surge, because of those winds, and now you're up inside a building where the heat rises, there's no elevator. You'd have to go up and down the stairs. Can your pets climb the stairs as well too? And I think the chief can speak to this later. Not just that, if you need to be rescued, there's no elevator, those first responders would have to carry you up and down those stairs as well too. We saw that in Hurricane Sandy, a lot of those high-rise buildings that flooded out and people needed to be rescued. And another thing that could happen during an event is that no water. So if there's no water, there's no fire suppression. And then you'd have to go to a fire watch situation 24/7. That's a dangerous thing post-impact. So that's something to consider as well too. And these are all things that we ask you just to know your risk. And the next thing that we'll talk about is making a plan for these things, right? But these are the things to consider where you're at in your situation. I'm sure there's different considerations for a 2-story condo versus a 10 and 20-story condo. So I want you to consider that and your vulnerabilities to winds, surge, power outages, and the fact that maybe not all your units have wind protection coverings, okay, or impact windows. Now, whether or not you're in a flood zone, so maybe you're not in a storm surge zone, but you may be in a flood zone, those two things as well too, where you think you're evacuating up, your next greatest asset is your vehicle, and that could be located on the ground floor, and those will be flooded or storm surged out as well too. So your next highest asset is your vehicle, and that's something to consider as well too. Trying to move that to higher ground. If you're going to move your car to higher ground, I would suggest that you would go with your vehicle as well too. We assign evacuation levels by storm surge, as I mentioned. So every parcel or residence in Pinellas County has an evacuation zone assignment. You can look that up using our Know Your Zone application. And then for those along the Barrier Islands, the water spouts are really pretty to look at, but as soon as they hit the beach on land, they're called tornadoes. And, that's something you need to watch for. And again, having those particular window coverings as well too. And know to go inside. For water spout or tornadoes, go to the interior of your facility and hunker down in a corridor, a hallway, or a bathroom without any windows, okay? So those are the things to consider for knowing your risk, not meant to scare you, but meant for you to consider in your planning, right? So where can I find my evacuation zone? Yep, Jess has that up there, our Know Your Zone application. We have other ways as well too. We put it on everybody's Pinellas County water utility bill. You go to the property appraiser's website as well too if you own property and see that information. We also have a storm surge protector app where you can go and put in your address and see how deep the water could get for that particular location. And we have an automated phone system for Pinellas County landlines where you can dial that number and it will respond with your evacuation level as well too. And we have a Ready Pinellas mobile app, which we're excited that we're updating for this year and should be out by hurricane season. So look for that as well too. Get some good information from that. We're adding some notification capability to that. It's going to be a great tool once it's released to the app stores. So, I mentioned know your risk. Now it's time to make that plan, having a hurricane kit. And a hurricane kit, you say, well, if I don't have to evacuate, maybe you're in a non-evac and all that. It's still good to have a hurricane kit because if you did have to leave, that kit turns into your to-go kit, right? And having a kit when the power goes out and the wind's blowing and stuff and knowing where everything is also a good thing to have even within your own home, I'll go over those items in just a minute. Evacuation and sheltering. Know your options ahead of time. If you have to evacuate, where am I going to go? And make a plan for getting there by the end of the evacuation time. So we always have a start and end time to our evacuation orders. So knowing where to go and know your options and how you're going to get there, especially if you have pets. Work that out ahead of time, and remembering your durable medical goods and devices. If you're bringing those with you, do you have your battery backups or your charging cords and things like that that you need when I know those things are easy to use when you're in your home, but if you have to use them outside your home, are you prepared for that with all the right things you need to keep them functioning? I mentioned cars as well too. Pinellas County, I think, is the number 3rd rated number of boats in the state of Florida, registered boats. So think about that as well too, to move your boat to high dock, dry dock, and your vehicles out of storm surge or high winds to safety. So you don't have to worry about those items. You just worry about yourself. The hotel and motels, going to fill up fast here in Pinellas County. We don't have many that are not in a storm surge area. So, out of area hotels, host homes out of area as well too. And a host home could be, we ask you to go tens of miles, not hundreds of miles. And that would be somebody who's in a non-evac zone. So if we're calling like a B level of evacuation, you could go to a D or E evacuation zone because they're not in the evacuation order and stay there at a safe shelter as well too. We do have public shelters that will always open if we do order an evacuation, but those are not the best option. You get 20 square feet of space. It is on the hard ground. So I'll mention some things a little bit of what to bring with you. And just another thing too, to pay attention to, we still haven't decided, if we're going to have to deal with COVID during an evacuation or not at our shelters. And we're prepared for that to provide the spacing, the testing items for that, but not all shelters open at all times. So we open about 9 shelters for an A level evacuation, and we open up 20 something for a C. So you need to check which ones we're actually opening. We always open 3 pet shelters and 3 special needs and a couple of general population shelters. Next. Then some of the things I mentioned, the go bag or even a stay home bag or your to-go kit, your medications, copies of your prescriptions, some face coverings still in the time of COVID, some personal hygiene items, those things that are going to make you comfortable, and your necessities, especially your IDs and things like that. If you're going to be leave, it's good to have this kit in this bag for your personal comfort and safety for those things that you need. Additionally, if you are leaving your home, you need to have your important documents with you as well too, in a dry box that can keep your items with you, so that you have your deeds, your titles, your insurance policies, and things like that. Because unfortunately, if you can't get back to your home, you're going to want those things with you, right? And they could fit in a Tupperware box, or that's a file box right there that you're seeing online. But nice Ziploc or something just to put those all in. Okay. Next. Again, I mentioned, know your evacuation options, it's friends or family in a non-evacuation zones. Those are those white spots that you see on our map. Everybody refers to those the 2 islands of Pinellas. So, the rest, all the color, it means that there's some, storm surge that could be there with the right storm. Hotels and motels, obviously in those white spaces, or, going somewhere outside of the county as well too. But yeah, if you can get some space. And if you're in a non-evacuation zone yourself, or a condo even, maybe reach out and invite your families and friends, to come to your location. Many people don't want to raise their hand and ask for help. So it'd be nice if folks would reach out and say, hey, I have a safe place, come stay with us. We don't mind your pets. We can put them in the garage. We can put them in a closet or the door for those, few days or maybe just hours as the storm passes overhead. So that's just something to consider. We know that friends and folks don't want to be a bother, but maybe reaching out would be a better way to do that. And of course, we're always going to have the public shelters available. Please, if you really need a spot, those are going to be available to you. Next. So, staying informed is our third pillar. And what we want with that is to only use trusted sources of information in this day and age of the internet and social media and whatnot. Trusted sources, who are those? Those are local sources of information. Pinellas County government, Pinellas County Emergency Management, your local city. Our local news channels that we work with, that come to the OC, we share information with them, use those local sources of information. And just give you an example, when those cold fronts are coming through from up north and they're traveling through, down through South Florida, those strong lines of winds that are coming, looking at, Citrus County's local news and all that, they're going to say, oh, it's coming at, 4 a.m. in the morning for them. Well, it could be 2 hours later where that line is coming through Pinellas. So it's good to use Pinellas information and local news sources, because you'll get the actual timing that affects us, right? If it's a fast moving one, it could be within an hour past Citrus. Most of the times it's slower. It could be 2 hours after it hits Citrus that it actually comes to Pinellas. And that could be your drive time or some other time, or you're picking up your kids. So, use those local trusted sources of information. And we have avenues that we provide for that: our Alert Pinellas, our Ready Pinellas app, Twitter, and again, as I mentioned, the local media. A NOAA weather radio, everybody should have a radio, a battery operated or hand crank radio available to you, because we'll broadcast on 620 and 970 AM with them through the emergency broadcasting system. So broadcasting association, where we'll put out our information to them. But a NOAA weather radio is a good place, a good thing to have, especially before and after an event. Pay attention, as I mentioned, to the evacuation start and end times. Those are the times that we think that you should be getting your plan that you've already created. Make a plan, started, and then completing that time by end times, because the end time of the evacuation order, we suspect that working with the National Hurricane Center and National Weather Service, that the outside conditions are going to deteriorate quickly right after that. That we're expecting tropical storm force winds at least within a couple hours of that time. You really need to be where you are in your safe place by then, because things are going to get bad right after that. And we ask, when we do the business summit, I always mention is, we need our gas stations and folks like that to stay open as long as they can during that start and end time. But at some point, they need to let their employees go home so that they could prepare. So you need to get your gas and different things like that, food or non-perishables, ahead of time, because, those folks need to go home and prepare as well, too. So the end of the evacuation orders will expect everybody to be at their safe place. Which shelters are opening, as I mentioned that, and any special instructions that we may get out because of times of COVID. And, again, we don't open all shelters, or we may open many more because of COVID. You need to watch which shelters we're opening, because we don't open all 34 every single time. Some come and go depending on the size of the storm. Next. And then stay connected. I mentioned these. Our Ready Pinellas, we have an e-alert newsletter that goes out. We have Facebook, our PCTV as well too, all helping spread our message as well too. Next. And then our shelters, so we have 3 types of shelters, really 4. We have our general population shelter. That's where folks who are able to care for themselves can go, get 20 square foot of space and be safe there. We'll provide meals there. They're usually at our Pinellas County schools. If we have to go COVID, we'll provide 60 square foot of space as well too. Special needs, that's for folks, two things with that. Our special needs program is also a transportation program as well too. But special needs are for those with mild medical considerations and assistance that they need to get by for those maybe day and a half that you're at a shelter. We'll provide for those care, working with the Department of Health. If you're over 4 liters per oxygen and some other conditions, we may send you to a hospital for that. But, sign up for our special needs program. We triage everybody to see where the best place is for them to be sheltering. We will pick you up and take you there and take you home. We will care for your pet as well too. So for special needs, we'll take your pet and it'll go to animal services to be cared for. And then again, special needs are for those that, just need a little bit of assistance at the shelter. For those, again, we'll triage and send to a more advanced care. Our pet-friendly shelters, we have 3 of those. We moved those to high schools because, boy, everybody has pets in Pinellas County, which is great. So to make bigger space, the bigger gyms there. You bring your pet, cat or dog, in a crate. They care for them in the gym, and you're able to go there and feed them, walk them, and assist for them. So the pet friendly is like a general population shelter in that you can bring your pet and it can be housed there with you. And then you will help care for your pet along with animal services. But you're responsible for your pet while you're there. Special needs, again, is different. The pet will not be with the special needs shelters. They will be at animal care shelters, working with their partners, the humane societies and others to care for your pet, and then we'll reunite you with your pet after the storm. Then we also, for tropical storms, if we need to, we're, especially for mobile home park residents and things like that, we do have some community shelters that we will open that are non-school shelters. If we feel that the wind speeds are enough that folks do need to evacuate, or there will be a bit of storm surge here or there, we may open up some what we call community shelters, non-school shelters. Again, watch for our messaging for that. Next slide.
I think we'll go ahead and welcome the chief now
Okay.
to go ahead and talk about that. Thanks so much, Joe. A lot of great information for our condo residents. I'd like to go ahead and welcome Chief Javon Graham, the Division Chief of Emergency Management and Emergency Manager for the City of Clearwater.
Good afternoon. Hello,
Hi,
how are
Chief
you doing?
Graham.
My video isn't working. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay, good, good. So a lot of times what we need to worry about before the storm especially is that communication and that planning. Having a good communication with the residents, having good communication with the board and the property management, and then having an applicable plan to provide residents with a hurricane plan, information on updates, coordinating with the county, the region, communicating these plans with the residents as well. The association needs to have disaster plan, which is updated annually, shared with the residents, and also practiced. If you don't practice a plan, if you don't explain this to the residents, then it's only as good as the paper it's on. They have to understand what's going on and what to expect. Association members should also communicate these plans with the residents so that these expectations are set. You don't want somebody trying to look around to find safety and not have access when it's too late. There are time frames you have to work within, especially when an event is coming our way. Another consideration we need to look at is electricity turned off to the elevators? Is there access to the clubhouse or common areas? Do board members, are they going to stay on the property? All this needs to be evaluated before the storm. Also, there are personal responsibilities and personal accountabilities that residents have to take as well. They also need to know their evacuation plan. Even if you live on upper floors, you may be cut off. As Joe Boris mentioned earlier, with storm surge, it can go 2 stories. So be aware of the evacuation plan. If you're not in an evacuation zone, find a safe place for yourself to take shelter. An interior hallway, other windowless room is best, but have that plan. If you are going to go to a shelter, or if you're going to go to a friend's house, or if you're going to be a host because you are not in an evacuation zone, let's make sure those plans are set and that you know them and everybody who's going to be involved in that process is aware. Supplies. We need to make sure you have a set amount of supplies on hand just in case you do lose power. I mentioned that before in the kits that you should be responsible for. They should include first aid kits, flashlights, batteries, bottled water, your prescription medicines, a radio so you can hear the news and get updates. All these things should be part of your supplies that you should have on hand before the storm and have those ready. Again, there is time frame constraints. You don't want to do it the day of or the 12 hours of. You need to have this stuff ready and prepared early. Your shelter options. This is another consideration. If you do have to evacuate, know which shelter is better for you. Not every shelter is the same. Those who have special needs should go to those, but you need to pick a shelter that actually is better for the conditions or for your specific needs. And not a general, it's not a one size fits all. Some are general shelters, but some are more suited towards others, especially if you have pets or different medical conditions. Mr. Boris spoke about earlier, Alert Pinellas, using this as a resource to get information and stay updated. Also having transportation. Do you need to get transported from where your residence is, or do you need special transportation or somebody to come get you, or do you have your own vehicle? All this communication and all this should be discussed with residents and with yourselves and with your board and your association to make sure everybody has an idea of what you're going to do in the case of an event. So the communications. A lot of times your board of directors, your property management also needs to prepare their families and their homes. Know the timelines and build that into your association plans. Make sure your phone numbers are up to date. Make sure your communications are up to date. Make sure you know when it's safe to return. Have somebody who may be able to work as a floor monitor or somebody who can keep track or have a system to keep track of residents who leave the building. That way everybody can be accounted for. This is like having a disaster team, someone who can be the liaison to know this person decided to leave or they had to leave, where they went, so you can keep track of them when it's time to bring them back home as well. So some of the expectations, like I said, everybody has a little bit of personal responsibility as well. Some of the expectations, you have a storm coming in, winds can be dangerous, you have the storm surge and the flooding. Which areas of the building are to be closed off? The residents need to know this. Is electricity going to be cut down? Is water going to be cut off? And what services are you going to lose? You need to make sure you prepare your facility by bringing anything that can be a projectile or anything that can cause more damage. So by your early preparation, this could also include boarding up your windows, bringing in the furniture that can get thrown around and cause damage, not only to your structure, to others as well. So in preparing the property, like we said earlier, you need to make sure that the stuff that cannot be secured is strapped down securely. And if stuff is light or mobile, you can bring it in and secure it within the building so that it doesn't become a projectile and hurt other or damage other structures or facilities. Anything that's outdoor, if you have awnings, you need to bring them down, secure loose items, and again, have a plan. Communicate with your families, communicate with neighbors, communicate with the association, have this built into your plan so that everybody has an idea of what you're doing, where you're going. One thing they would be really bad is if you don't tell anybody you left and then somebody's looking for you. And then it also helps if they're saying, okay, we know where this family is. They went to this shelter. They went to another family member's house. Make sure that is part of your plan and you have this communicated to everybody. So the fire department during evacuation and transportation, like Mr. Boris said, a lot of times you may need help going to a shelter. You should try and pre-register if possible because, again, right before a storm, everybody's trying to get this help. Everybody's trying to secure stuff. So it's better to pre-register if you need to go to a shelter. And if you do need help, the fire departments and most public response agencies will help you. They have agreements to help you get to the special shelters or the different shelters that you need to go to. Also, the bus systems will take you to shelters if you not have your own transportation. But again, picking your shelter is important. If you have special needs, you need to make sure you know what shelter you need to go to because some are better suited for those with medical conditions. Make sure you bring your medicines, make sure you have access to them, and you bring all your belongings that you need and that you can account for. And if you do need assistance to the shelters, we help the fire departments and public safety does help to get to these shelters. We just need to know in advance, and a lot of that is best to pre-register. Now, during the storm is the time when you kind of need to hunker down, stay inside, try and stay away from the rooms that have windows because you don't want your windows to break. You don't want to have things go through them. Winds can get pretty strong depending on the different categories that you're dealing with. A tropical storm obviously is easier to manage as opposed to a hurricane of 2 or 3. So shelter in place. This is what we do as the fire department. When the winds reach too high, usually it's 40 to 45 miles per hour, depending on the type of trucks we have, there's a point of time when we can't go out anymore. What we do is we stage our calls and we track the amount of calls that come in, but it becomes a safety hazard for us, just like it is for you as well. So we need to make sure that we can track these calls, and you need to make sure you're in a safe place. And as soon as the winds die down and it's safe to do so, we will go out. But while you're waiting, while you're trying to ride out the event, make sure you're not using candles. You're using battery operated flashlights and forms of communication. Candles can get knocked over. They can cause fires. And if people sometimes forget they have a candle, they go to sleep, then you have another issue. And there's the problem is we may not be able to come and help. And so that becomes a safety concern as well. So make sure everything is battery operated. So after the storm, we do go out and do what you consider damage assessments. We do our first pushes where we try and clear our major roadways, and then we go out and try and look and see which areas have the most damage. This information is transferred to the county, and it's also transferred to other agencies within the city. This lets us know which areas we need to start going and do search and rescue with as well. The more harder hit areas, we go in and bring teams in and try and do detailed searches. Along with our searches, again, as your associations, make sure you can communicate with residents when it's safe to return, and we're going to try and do that as well. Do not just come back. A lot of times people think, okay, the winds died down, it's safe to come back. Well, sometimes you have storm surge that needs to go down. You have power lines that are down. You have trees that are down. All this stuff needs to be cleared and made safe before you're allowed to, or before you should go home. And so try and stay where you are if you're in a shelter, or if you are home, stay inside. Give us a little time to make sure we can clear areas, make sure that we can make it safe for you to come out, because right after the storm is still just as dangerous. Standing water sometimes hide holes. So if you go out and you go on standing water, you can fall into a sinkhole or a depression or a storm drain that has actually got pushed away by the water. So it can be just as dangerous after the storm as it is during. Another thing is with power outages. If you lose power, A lot of times people use their stove tops and counters and everything else to store stuff. That's a bad habit to get into, because once power is turned on, if your stove got bumped, then all of a sudden that becomes a fire hazard. So you need to make sure you keep those areas clear. You don't load stuff on top of them, and you can keep everything as steady and as precise as you can, because when power comes back on, or you start getting these utilities back on, you don't want another issue to happen. Make sure you have working smoke alarms, and if you have a generator, it stays outside, away from openings. And again, make sure you have a CO detector to detect those levels, because CO is odorless and tasteless, and you won't know if it's filling up your house.
Great. Thank you so much, Chief. A lot of great information there. And for our attendees, just to let you know, we will be sending a full resource guide with a link to the video and all the resources that we're discussing during the presentation. So not to worry. I know it can be a little overwhelming, like drinking from a fire hose sometimes. So not to worry, we'll get all those resources out to you. Next, I want to welcome Ms. Dawn Forst from Skywater On-Call Emergency Services, a disaster restoration service. Now, Dawn, we've discussed personal preparation and the preparation going on around the county, but there's another level of preparation that exists with condominiums, and that is the association and the common grounds. Can you talk about some preparation considerations for the association, the property manager, and the board, and give our association some tips?
Yes, no problem. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. Are you going to start the slides, Jess? Great. So it can be tough to get people thinking about an emergency preparedness before disaster strikes. And I found this interesting last year. The CDC created these zombie posters to spark some attention and get people involved before it's too late. And after 2020, I don't know, this could be a possibility in the future, right? So get a kit, make a plan, and be prepared. When you're managing living in a condominium association, it's very important that you convey to the residents, as well as the employees and the property management team, that they need to get prepared. And if this is a way to get their attention, then please take advantage of it. Next slide. So last year, the Atlantic hurricane names are listed here. And as we can see with 2022, we've got our new list of names as well. And we are expected to have a very active hurricane season, but knock on wood, hopefully the Pinellas County area will dodge another hurricane like we've had for the past 100 years since it landed in Tarpon in the early 1920s. So hopefully no one has these names, but let's hope we don't even make it past Bonnie this year. Next slide. So it's very important that you communicate to your residents. And as we know here in Florida, we have seasonal residents. We have residents that live here full time. We obviously have residents that have family throughout the United States. And whenever it is seasonal time for hurricane, take advantage of your communication, whether it's your newsletter, your Facebook, emails. You want to keep your residents updated. The one thing about hurricanes that I do convey, I've been doing disaster recovery for over 20 years in the Pinellas County area, is that we have 6 months out of the year to prepare and 6 months to actually be concerned if a storm is going to hit. And normally we have a couple days warning if we're going to have a storm, unlike a fire, which could happen within 2 minutes, your entire unit could be inflamed. So again, take advantage of communication, lean on your vendors, even if you want to do any type of community, hurricane parties prior to hurricane season, encouraging residents to talk with their agents. Every single year, they need to review their insurance documents to make sure that they're covered, drywall in, drywall out. So, just remind them, renter's insurance, things like that, just all kinds of tips. And as you can see, Pinellas County offers a lot of different things you can share with your residents to add to the content of your communication. Next slide. Before the storm, here are some tips that I think is very important that you should implement within your association, is the people factor. Again, like I just said, communication is key with your residents, staff, and tenants. Utilize Facebook, newsletters, email, TikTok, whatever. Have your building inspected by a licensed professional to find out if there is any vulnerable to hurricane force winds and what is recommended for retrofit. Are your residents and staff in town? Is it a holiday? You want to, lean on all that You want to recognize all that and have those answers with your team, especially with residents, making sure you know if are they seasonal or not. You would hate to think that someone is still in the building when they aren't. Review your property insurance with the company's insurance agent concerning the hazards of a hurricane. So as a property manager, as the board president, get with your agent every year, your broker, sit down and understand exactly what is covered and what is not. And everyone wants to save money, and unfortunately right now gas prices are so high and everything is costing so much, but you really do not want to skimp on your insurance coverage. For an extra $100, to have a certain type of coverage, it's worth it. Also making sure you look into, make sure, again, I'm not a broker, but this is extremely important. I've had experiences at fires, for example, where the resident thought they were covered and they were not, or they didn't have renter's insurance, and renter's insurance is like $100, I think. It's not even that much. So encourage your residents as well to review their policy. Prepare a list and backup list of vendors for disaster recovery services: your oil, your gas, restoration, sprinkler, fire watch, security, tree removal, roofing, electricians. Even though you talk to them regularly, make sure you find a time. Right now is a great time. Reach out to them, ask them what is their hurricane plan. Ask them for their plan. What happens if your building is affected? How are you going to come here? And how am I listed as a priority? And what can I do to be that priority for your company? So it's very important to reach out to your vendors. And again, we're also used to technology, and it's brought so many wonderful things into the world. But again, there's nothing like a hard copy paper with a phone number on it in case your computer's not working or you've run out of battery. Next slide, please. Before the storm, again, make provisions for alternate communications and power. I used to recommend maybe find someone who lives out of state, who doesn't mind. Maybe they have what's called an answering machine. We used to have back in the day, a landline that residents can call and at least get that recording to say the property's okay, or, everyone's been evacuated, no one can still return, whatever that communication is, or even just letting everyone know that everybody's okay. Because obviously after the storm passes, not only our residents are going to wonder if they're not actually in the building, what's going on. Let's say they're seasonal, or maybe even family members wondering, is my family okay? Inform key employees or essential staff of their specific responsibilities concerning your hurricane procedure. Is there a place offsite critical team members to meet? This is where you're just going to sit with your team. You're just going to get out your piece of paper and just go through it, understanding who's in charge of communicating with media. You only want to have one person doing that. Who's in charge of communicating to the residents? Who's in charge of walking the property? Whatever the responsibilities are, so everybody knows what their responsibilities are when a disaster happens. So a disaster is coming. We know a hurricane is here. Your staff has evacuated to their homes safely. If the storm has passed and the area where the building is at has been affected, maybe have an alternate location to meet up at. That way you guys can all come together as a team and begin the recovery process. Establish in writing emergency spend levels. This is very important because as a board president or even a property manager, if your board president doesn't live here, you need to have authorization to spend some money and what those levels are. Because maybe on a day-to-day, you can't spend more than X amount of dollars, but when a storm hits, you're going to need to increase that. Spreadsheet with cell phone, home, and responsibility built-in printout. As I said earlier, print out your phone numbers, have that on hand. If appropriate, develop a system for identification of employees, ID cards, vehicle permits, badges, maintain access control at critical points, inform employees on when and how they will be notified to return to work. Now, if you live on Sand Key, if you live anywhere by the water, it's very important that you go to your municipality to get your emergency pass. I meant to bring mine in because I do live on the water in Madeira Beach, and we have an emergency pass that we hang on our car that allows us access back onto the island. So very important to do that. You only get, I think, so many per resident, but you would hate to not be able to get back to your home, your condo. If you have any questions, of course, you're welcome to reach out to me after the presentation. Tanks filled, of course, make sure you get your tanks filled. Back to the ID, another thing that I recommend with your emergency response vendors is I would type out a letter with your letterhead of your association stating that this particular vendor has authority to enter your building. So that way, if there are FEMA or cops around, they know that they're allowed to have access to your building. Tanks filled and generator tested. You should be doing this definitely prior to hurricane season. Capacity of existing generator to determine if additional capacity is needed. Generators will be scarce immediately after a storm. And please don't rely on your restoration contractor who's coming in to restore your building and dry it out, because they're going to utilize their generators to power up their equipment, not the whole building. So that's very important to review that, especially if you have a generator on staff. If a high-rise building considers installing, I would definitely consider installing a transfer switch to connect temporary generator, and review the plan with your staff always. Next slide. 72 to 48 hours before landfall, you're going to notice I'm going to repeat a lot of the same things. For example, again, the people factor. Communication is key. Communicate with your residents, your staff, and tenants. Let them know what's going on via Facebook, newsletter, email, LinkedIn. Contact the onboarded licensed restoration vendor to secure mobilization and resource requirements such as large material requests, generators, fuel, and potable water. Determine and acquire emergency protective equipment and supplies, heavy plastic sheeting, duct tape, masking tape, sandbags, storm shutters, chainsaw, large pieces of plywood, hand tools, and other essential items. Fill fleet cars and equipment gas tanks, test generators, and top off the tank. And fuel suppliers need backup due to availability after the storm. Real quick, regarding vehicles, if you are in a condominium and you do have a parking garage, it's very important to encourage residents to bring the cars to the top of the parking garage, or even to remove them entirely. I can't remember what storm, it could have been Harvey. There were so many cars that were destroyed during that storm, so be prepared. Next slide, please. Take pictures to help substantiate insurance claims. It's very important prior to hurricane season. Take your photos of all of your contents, all of your items, your building. I would even videotape. Document everything. Consider plans to work with limited cash. So again, cash is king. No water, sewer, or gasoline for at least 2 weeks. This is worst case scenario. Prepare a list and backup list of vendors for disaster recovery services. Again, like I said earlier, you want to still call them 72 hours out. You want them on speed dial, your oil, your gas, restoration, sprinkler, etc. Protect the data with the backup files offsite. Very important to do that, and definitely at least even to a backup drive or like a passport where you can save all of your files. Inform employees on when and how they will be notified to return to work. You want to review the plan with staff. I know you can be doing it for years where you're just reading a piece of paper, but when the time comes and the disaster hits, you'll be surprised how much that little practice actually helps. Next slide. 24 hours before landfall. Now we know the storm is fastly approaching. Again, people factor. Keep communicating with your residents, even if you're repeating the same thing you said yesterday. Communication is key. Move elevators to the second floor. If this is 24 hours before the storm is hitting, if the elevator shaft floods, the elevator car will be safe. So definitely move that to the second floor. Move all cars to the highest levels of the parking garage, as I said earlier. Protect data with backup files offsite. Make sure your exterior dumpsters are emptied and secure. So I would probably do that maybe 48 hours, call your, whoever's going to dump that out, make sure that's emptied. Secure exterior and interior, charge phones and laptops, and have battery operated radio and flashlights available. Next slide. I think that's it. Is that all, Jess?
I think that's it. Thank you so much, Dawn. A
You're
lot of great
welcome.
information for our associations. We appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Next, I want to welcome Barry Scarr with Essentia Insurance and the current insurance chair for the Florida Legislative Alliance. Barry, can you talk about the unique dynamic that exists with condominium insurance and walk us through some of the roles and responsibilities of the association and the condo unit owner?
Okay. Thank you, Jess, and I'm glad to be here. Wanted to talk about several things that I think that are very important for the association. You can go ahead and we're gonna be sharing the risk here. So you can go to the next slide. This is a diagram of what the unit owners are responsible. So this is by statute. The most important thing for the unit owner is to please make sure you've got a condominium HO6 policy in force. And we're going to talk about a little bit more, but these are the items that you need, that you're responsible by law, by statute in Florida to insure. So if you can choose to self-insure that for sure, but these are the items that you you are responsible for insuring, and the association is not. The association's responsibility is kind of, all of the building, the everything, even the air conditioning system, the association is responsible for insuring. So the unit owner is really just their personal contents, wall, floor, ceiling coverings, improvements, and appliances. So all the main building parts is the association's responsibility. They've got that covered. As a unit owner, you're not going to have to be concerned about that. And Don did a great job of talking about before the storm. And again, the biggest issue is, of course, I would have some of your documents for the association and the unit owner on, backed up on computer files. We're hoping that the association already has a disaster plan, and you can help develop that disaster plan by signing up with a company like Skywater to be on their preferred list. So when the disaster happens, you're not scrambling like everybody else is to find a contractor to assist. Also, it's important to take photos when necessary. On the association side, it's a good idea to take photos of the roofs before the damage, and then of course after. So it's very important for the homeowner to do the same thing. If you've got damage, photos are huge. Of course, we want to, on the association side, we want to update contract info and building maintenance record. These are huge for the association. So if they go into a claim situation for major wind damage, the carrier is going to want to see that information, and those that have it will get their claims processed first. The other area that we bumped into with concerns is bank account signatures. So make sure the association's funds are accessible and available via current signature, board officer signatures, so you can get cash. And that in cash could be obviously an issue with ATM machines down. Also, taking the measures of immediately and mitigating your damages. So once the damages is incurred, we're going to have it's probably going to be water damage. We want to start taking steps to drying in and drying out, and also be familiar condo boards that emergency board powers and special powers are conferred by the state on boards that enable them to maneuver through associations and through post-disaster periods will go into effect. I think it's important that everybody understands that the hurricane deductible is going to be typically a large amount. I had this association this past November 20 with Ada, not 21 but 20, November 11th. I had an association that was heavily damaged with rain and storm and roof damage. The day after Ada hit, the OIR, the Office of Insurance Regulation, announced that the hurricane deductibles would not apply in this event. So I was very pleased, because now we had a $5,000 flat deductible for all of their damage instead of the $300,000 2% hurricane deductible that they had. So you need to be aware of when that happens, you're going to be on the hook for that, and then the carrier will not be involved until obviously the deductible is passed. So be aware of that. Hopefully our appraisals for the association are up to date, and they need to be updated every 36 months. But most everybody's on top of that, so we're good on that. But again, my concern is all the properties covered for the association, and to be aware of that deductible. This is just that we can go past that. Thanks, Jess. The flood is changing. So, the way they're going to develop premium for flood for associations is going to change, but the coverage is not. So, we've got the maximum coverage available for every condo, $250,000 per unit. I think it's very important that associations and owners know that they also can buy flood insurance for their individual unit. The flood covers a little bit more than the hazard policy because it does not recognize state statutes, FEMA and NFIP or federal programs. So the only items that you're going to need to worry about insuring are your personal contents, those items that move. So if that's a concern, be aware of that. If you're on the first, second, or third floor, you might want to consider getting a quote for flood. So some tips I wanted to mention about, choose an agent that's obviously experienced with the community associations in condos and HOAs. And knowing that you can also ask your agency for an independent risk analysis or loss control inspection. We provide that at a Century Insurance at no cost. So, sometimes there will be a cost. You don't want to ask the carrier for that, which we don't need the carrier to know us that well at this point. But I think an independent risk analysis can be helpful prior to and after a storm. So after the storm, we're going to start to get into the claims process and making sure that your agency has been notified, either if it's an HO6 for the homeowner or the master policy for the association. Make sure they have been notified that the claim is in process and that there is a point of contact that's been assigned to the claim for the association. And as you're moving forward with contractors, restoration companies or building contractors, please be aware that you should not ever sign an AOB, an assignment of benefits form that would assign the benefits to your claim to a third party.
Great. That's a lot of great information. Barry, there's an important coverage that all condo owners should know about called loss assessment. Can we talk about what loss assessment is and what should our condo owners know?
So that's huge. So the most important thing about getting an HO6 condominium homeowner policy is you automatically by statute get a $2,000 limit on loss assessment. When we have a major hit and a lot of damage is incurred, your association is going to have a very large hurricane deductible. It's going to be a percentage of the value of your building. And it could be $30,000 or it could be $300,000. And when that happens, whether they meet the deductible or not, the association is going to meet shortly after, and they're going to levy a special assessment to all the owners to recover the hurricane deductible. Your HO6 policy has a minimum limit by statute of $2,000 with only a $250 deductible to help you pay for that assessment. The only way you can get that is to have that policy. And we know that almost 50% of homeowners in condos do not have any coverage. So it's really important that you consider that, because that's going to be the biggest area where you're going to have the probability of filing a claim.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Barry. That's all very helpful information. We're running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to now talk about our pledge to plan for hurricane season. Pinellas County Emergency Management encourages all residents to take the pledge to make a plan for hurricane season. As you can see here, we have the QR codes. We have the survey, the pledge in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. You can go ahead and scan the QR code, or when you get the follow-up resource guide from us, we'll also have the link to all the surveys in there as well. And I want to take a quick poll before we sign off. And this poll asked, due to this webinar, and you can select as many as apply. The options are feel more prepared, We'll create a personal disaster plan. We'll encourage my association to create a plan. We'll register for Alert Pinellas, or we'll build a hurricane kit. And why we are getting all of your responses, I want to say thank you so much to our panelists for providing us all that helpful information. Again, we'll be sending all that out to everyone that registered for the webinar, so you have that information and resources at your fingertips. And I want to thank you all for joining us and wish everybody a safe hurricane season. And don't forget to make your plans. I'll let these results keep coming in. Looks like we've almost hit everybody participating. Great. After the webinar, a link will pop up in the window once you close it. And it's just a brief survey asking about your experience on the webinar. You'll also receive the link to the follow-up survey. If you can't do it now or don't want to do it now, you'll get that survey link in the follow-up resource guide. So your feedback is very valuable to us and will be used in future planning of future webinars and educational events. So thank you so much for joining us. Let me go ahead and share these results. So it looks like our audience definitely felt that the information was useful, and we love to hear that. And we hope that we can help you with the resources to make those plans. Of course, you can always reach out to emergency management at ema@pinellascounty.org. Thank you so much for joining us, and stay safe.